Welcome to the deep dive. We are so glad you're here with us today.
Really glad to be digging into this one.
Yeah, if you have a million things competing for your attention, but you still have this intense desire to actually understand the forces shaping our world, without getting completely buried in information overload, you are in the exact right place.
Absolutely.
We've got a truly massive, frankly, unbelievable story to dig into today. We're looking at a comprehensive Wikipedia article detailing the century-long history of an absolute titan of global industry, the Boeing Company.
It is a fascinating document to go through. Looking at the sheer scale of the information gathered here, it paints a picture of a company that isn't just a business. I mean, this is an institution that has literally shaped human history and global geography.
Yeah, it really has. Our mission for this deep dive is to map out this entire journey for you. We're going to explore Boeing's surprising origins, break down its major modern divisions, and look closely at the pivotal 1997 corporate merger that, well, according to the source, changed absolutely everything.
It really was the turning point.
From there, we have to talk about the recent, highly publicized safety challenges the company has faced, before finally looking at where Boeing stands today, financially and in terms of leadership, as we sit here looking at their data from 2025 and early 2026.
Right.
And to help connect all these dots, I am joined by our resident expert, the perfect guide to help us navigate this timeline.
I'm really looking forward to this. When you analyze this source material, the story of Boeing goes way beyond an aerospace timeline. It is arguably the ultimate masterclass in how subtle shifts in corporate culture can completely alter the trajectory of an entire global industry.
Yeah.
It is a story about cutting-edge innovation, but also about the incredible risks of losing sight of what made you great in the first place.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if you ask most people how the world's premier aerospace company started, they would probably guess it was founded by a team of brilliant aeronautical engineers in some high-tech lab.
That would make sense, sure.
But looking at these notes, that's not the case at all. According to the source, it started with a lumber industrialist.
It's a wild historical detail. Back in 1916, a man named William E. Boeing, an American lumber industrialist operating out of Seattle, Washington, just decided to look up from the forests and focus on the sky.
Wow.
He teamed up with a man named Conrad Westervelt to build a seaplane. They originally named the company something entirely different, Pacific Aero Products Company.
A lumberman looking at wood and canvas and deciding to build airplanes.
Exactly. They quickly renamed it to the Boeing Airplane Company. But to understand the modern behemoth we know today, the source points to a major structural shift that happened a bit later, in 1934.
What happened in 34?
Well, back then, Boeing wasn't just building planes, they were flying them too, under a massive conglomerate called United Aircraft and Transport Corporation. The U.S. government actually stepped in and legally forced aircraft manufacturing to separate from air transportation.
Which is wild to think about today. Imagine if Ford or Toyota also owned the entire interstate highway system and all the major taxi companies.
It was considered a massive antitrust issue. This 1934 breakup dissolved Boeing's parent group into 3 distinct entities. It famously spun off United Airlines to handle the flying, and it forced Boeing to focus purely on the manufacturing side of the equation.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, that legally mandated focus is what set Boeing on the path to becoming the manufacturing powerhouse of the 20th century.
To give you, the listener, a clear mental map of what this company actually looks like in the modern era, the source breaks Boeing down into 3 main pillars.
Right, the modern divisions.
First, there's Boeing Commercial Airplanes, or BCA. These are the folks building the passenger jets you've probably flown on. The 737, the 767, the 7777, and the 787 Dreamliner.
The planes we all know.
Exactly. Second, you have Boeing Global Services, BGS, which is the massive aftermarket support and maintenance arm. And third, there is Boeing Defense, Space and Security, known as BDS. They build military airplanes, rotorcraft like helicopters, satellites, and spacecraft.
It is crucial to grasp the scale here. We aren't talking about departments in a single office building. We are talking about globally distributed ecosystems, employing hundreds of thousands of people over the decades, managing supply chains that stretch across continents.
Now, before we look deeper at that third pillar, defense and space, we should note that our sources cover some heavy geopolitical ground here.
Yes, they do.
Just to be clear with you listening, our goal today isn't to weigh in on the politics or take sides on any of these global conflicts, left-wing or right-wing. We're just here to unpack the facts exactly as they are laid out in the documents.
Exactly. We are just reporting the text.
Right. Looking at the data, the source details that Boeing has faced significant criticism and widespread protests over its defense contracts, specifically supplying weapons used in conflicts in Yemen and Gaza.
The text notes this backlash has included university divestment campaigns by student groups across the country, as well as physical blockades of Boeing facilities by demonstrators.
That is a lot of pressure.
On the international stage, the source neutrally reports that China has imposed sanctions on Boeing over an $11.1 billion arms sale to Taiwan.
Managing that kind of geopolitical pressure on top of commercial flight and global maintenance is staggering.
I want to ask you, the listener, to just imagine the complexity of what we've described so far. You have three massively distinct, high-stakes global industries, all under one corporate umbrella.
Right.
You have engineers, diplomats, mechanics, and financiers all trying to speak the same language. It sets the stage for some massive logistical and cultural challenges.
So if they were this unstoppable engineering powerhouse for nearly 80 years, when did the cracks actually start to show? Because it seems like all the sources point back to one specific moment in the late 90s.
The documents highlight December of 1996, when Boeing announced its intention to merge with McDonnell Douglas. It took until August of 1997 to complete because it was delayed by objections from the European Commission.
Oh, why did Europe object?
They were worried about a monopoly. They forced Boeing to drop some exclusivity agreements with airlines before letting it go through.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Because the mechanics of the merger are one thing, but the source cites a 2020 report by Quartz that describes the aftermath as a massive clash of corporate cultures.
A total culture war.
It was widely framed as a battle for the soul of the company. On one side, you had Boeing's traditional culture, famously dominated by engineers. On the other side, you had McDonnell Douglas's culture, which the report bluntly describes as being run by bean counters.
And according to the source, the bean counters won.
Yeah.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the implications of that victory are profound. Think about what that means on a factory floor day to day. When engineers run the show, the ultimate goal is the perfect, safest machine. When finance runs the show, the ultimate goal is efficiency and shareholder return.
The huge shift in priorities.
The source references a 2022 Netflix documentary called Downfall, The Case Against Boeing. That documentary argued this specific 1997 merger resulted in a slow, steady disintegration of workplace morale. The focus pivoted sharply away from engineering excellence and rigorous safety and straight toward Wall Street, stock prices, and profit margins.
The classic struggle of the people making the product versus the people balancing the spreadsheet.
You can literally track that shift on a map. For nearly a century, Boeing's brain trust was in Seattle, deeply integrated with the engineering hubs and the actual manufacturing factory floors. But in 2001, following the merger, they moved the corporate headquarters to Chicago.
Getting away from the factories.
Exactly. And eventually, in 2022, they moved it again to Arlington, Virginia.
Putting thousands of physical miles between the executives making the financial decisions and the engineers who actually understand how the airplanes are built.
You isolate the C-suite from the factory floor. The executives in Chicago or Arlington aren't bumping into the lead structural engineers in the cafeteria anymore. They are looking at spreadsheets, not wing assemblies.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
When a culture prioritizes cost-cutting from a distance, the people on the ground often feel pressured to deliver on unrealistic timelines.
We have to look at the tragic real-world results of those shifting priorities. The source material directly links this cultural shift to the catastrophic crashes in 2018 and 2019 of two Boeing 737X narrow-body passenger airplanes.
Just devastating.
In the span of just a few months, Lion Air Flight 610 and Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 both crashed. 346 people died. There were no survivors.
It is an unimaginable human tragedy. The immediate response from aviation regulators and airlines globally was unprecedented. They grounded all 737 MAX airliners around the world. A total of 387 aircraft were pulled from the skies.
The source outlines the investigations that followed, synthesizing findings from the FAA and the U.S. House of Representatives.
Yeah.
And this is where we need to talk about MCS.
Right, the software system.
The source mentions this was a flight stabilizing feature that forced the planes into nosedives. But reading between the lines of the engineering reports, the why behind MCS is crucial to understanding the culture shift we've been talking about.
It really is. To keep up with competitors without spending billions designing a brand new airplane, Boeing decided to put much larger, more fuel-efficient engines on the old 737 airframe.
Seems like a practical shortcut.
Except because the engines were so big, they had to be mounted further forward and higher up on the wing. This physically changed the center of gravity of the airplane, making it naturally want to pitch its nose up in certain conditions.
So instead of changing the physical design, they used software to fix a hardware problem.
They created MCS, the Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System. Its job was to automatically push the nose down to compensate. But the House report cited numerous instances where Boeing prioritized deadline and budget constraints over safety.
Which is terrifying.
They actively hid essential information about this system from the FAA. They specifically downplayed the need for simulator training for pilots because requiring new training would have cost their airline customers more money.
And that might have cost Boeing sales.
Exactly.
The financial penalties were massive. In January 2021, Boeing agreed to a $2.5 billion settlement for fraud regarding the hiding of information from regulators. Then, in 2022, they were ordered to pay another $200 million over charges of misleading investors about safety issues.
Staggering numbers.
But there is a detail in this source regarding the legal fallout that absolutely stops you in your tracks. In a 2023 court filing regarding the Ethiopian Airlines crash, Boeing's lawyers actually disputed that the victims experienced pain and suffering as the plane was nosediving.
It's hard to even process that defense.
They argued that because of the extreme G-forces and the impact happening at the, quote, speed of sound, the victims died too quickly to feel pain.
It makes you stop and think about the sheer disconnect. For a company whose entire brand was once built on the phrase, "If it ain't Boeing, I ain't going," to be making that kind of argument in a courtroom, it shows a complete detachment from the human element of what they do.
Definitely.
The source notes that critics, including HuffPost, described the claim as preposterous. The families of the victims argued that the passengers undeniably suffered horrific emotional distress, knowing the airplane was malfunctioning for several minutes as it plummeted.
That legal defense really underscores the extent of the cultural shift. The safety timeline in our source brings things right up to January 5, 2024, with Alaska Airlines Flight 1282. This was a 737 MX-9 jetliner.
Another major incident.
Just after taking off from Portland, having reached just over 16,000 feet, a mid-air door plug completely blew out, leaving a gaping door-sized hole in the side of the fuselage while the plane was in the air.
Thankfully, the aircraft made a successful emergency landing and there were no fatalities, though several people were injured. The incident triggered another wave of panic and groundings. The FAA mandated immediate inspections of all 737 MX-9s with those door plugs, grounding 171 aircraft.
United Airlines quickly found loose bolts on their grounded jets, too. The National Transportation Safety Board, the NTSB, released a preliminary report a month later.
What's fascinating here is the sheer simplicity of the root cause. This wasn't a highly complex, hidden software glitch like MCS.
No.
The NTSB indicated that 4 bolts used to secure the door panel had been removed and simply never replaced at Boeing's factory in Renton, Washington. Just 4 missing bolts.
4 missing bolts at the factory. The Justice Department opened a criminal probe into the blowout in March 2024, and the FAA massively expanded its audits.
It's just unbelievable.
Relating this back to you listening right now, when you step onto a commercial flight, you aren't just trusting the pilot. You are placing blind trust in a massive, sprawling supply chain. You are trusting the corporate culture of the manufacturer.
You assume the bolts are there.
A story about 4 missing bolts isn't just a business story. It is a highly personal issue for anyone who flies.
It shatters the illusion of perfection the aerospace industry relies on. Commercial aviation is built on the premise of zero tolerance for error. When a factory floor allows a plane to leave without securing a panel, it points to a systemic, deep-rooted breakdown in quality control.
The fallout from that Alaska Airlines blowout made 2024 an incredibly chaotic year for the company. Amidst all these cascading safety scandals, the source shows Boeing delivered only 348 aircraft to customers in 2024.
That's incredibly low.
To put that in perspective, that was their lowest output since the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. To make matters worse, in September 2024, they suffered a massive labor strike by 33,000 machinists.
The financial survival tactics Boeing had to deploy during this cash flow crisis were drastic. They announced 17,000 job cuts in October 2024, roughly 10% of their entire global workforce. They also had to delay the first deliveries of their massive new 777X airliner by another year.
On October 28, 2024, they initiated a stock sale valued at nearly $19 billion.
This wasn't for growth or research. This was a purely defensive maneuver to address their cash flow and avoid having their credit rating downgraded to junk status, which would have made borrowing money incredibly expensive.
The strike did finally end in November 2024, but only after Boeing agreed to a new contract, giving the workers a massive 38% pay raise over 4 years, plus ratification bonuses.
So their labor costs skyrocketed.
The cost of doing business went up significantly, and understandably, this sustained crisis led to a major leadership shakeup. The CEO during the Alaska Airlines incident, Dave Calhoun, stepped down. In July 2024, Kelly Ortberg took over as the new president and CEO, with Steve Mollenkopf serving as the board chair.
Ortberg's team almost immediately initiated a massive structural reversal to try and regain control over their manufacturing quality. In mid-2024, Boeing agreed to reacquire Spirit AeroSystems for $4.7 billion.
The irony here is thick when you think back to the bean counter culture we talked about earlier. Spirit AeroSystems is the company that builds the fuselages, the main bodies of the airplanes. Boeing actually used to own them, but spun them off into an independent company back in 2005.
The goal was to outsource the work, save money, and please Wall Street.
Almost 20 years later, they are having to spend $4.7 billion to bring that exact same supplier back in-house just to fix the quality control issues they created.
It is the ultimate admission that the financial engineering strategy completely failed the physical engineering reality. You cannot outsource your core competency without losing control of the product.
Right.
And adding to the complexity, there's a regulatory update from late 2025 in the source. In December 2025, the Federal Trade Commission ordered Boeing to divest certain Spirit assets to resolve antitrust concerns, specifically the parts of Spirit's business that supply parts to Airbus, Boeing's main rival. So even in trying to fix their own broken supply chain, they are navigating intense regulatory hurdles.
Despite all of this, the crashes, the blowouts, the strikes, the massive payouts, the supply chain buybacks, the source shows us a 2025 financial data. It's a testament to the fact that Boeing operates in an effective duopoly with Airbus. The world simply needs airplanes, and there are only two major players who can build them at this scale.
Very true.
In 2025, Boeing reported an astounding $89.5 billion in revenue, and they actually managed a net income of $2.24 billion. They survived the turbulence.
They survived the balance sheet crisis, but the fundamental tension between the engineers and the executives is still very much alive.
The source provides this incredible anecdote from early 2024 that perfectly illustrates that. Following the Alaska Airlines door blowout, a shareholder formally proposed moving the corporate headquarters back to the Seattle area.
Interesting.
The entire goal of the proposal was to force the executives to get out of Virginia and get on-site access to the engineering and quality control teams in Washington state.
It was a direct attempt to heal that physical and cultural divide. And how did the board respond?
The board soundly dismissed the attempt. They are staying in Virginia.
Which tells you a lot about how deeply entrenched the modern corporate structure remains, even after everything that has happened.
So what does this all mean? If we zoom out and look at the whole picture we've covered today, Boeing grew from a lumberman's canvas seaplane project in 1916 into a global titan of manufacturing. It eventually lost its engineering-first identity to a finance-first merger with McDonnell Douglas, which led to a corporate culture that prioritized stock prices and rapid production over rigorous safety margins.
The defining tragedy of the modern era for them.
It suffered tragic, fatal consequences because of that shift, and now today, it is spending billions of dollars to buy back its own supply chain and stabilize a frustrated workforce just to keep the planes in the sky.
For you, the listener, I think the major takeaway here is that Boeing's story over the last century is the definitive case study in corporate governance. It proves, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that in highly technical, life-critical industries like aerospace, you cannot simply engineer the balance sheet.
No, you can't.
You have to engineer the product. When the spreadsheets become more important than the bolts holding the door to the fuselage, the entire foundation of the company is at risk. It is a harsh, incredibly costly lesson in the physical limits of financial engineering.
I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over, something the source teases right at the very end. According to the Wall Street Journal, as of late September 2025, Boeing is quietly planning a brand new, clean-sheet, single-aisle airplane.
A completely new design.
This would be the plane to finally, permanently succeed the 737 MX. As Boeing prepares to design its first truly new commercial jet in a generation, the question isn't just whether the engineers can design a plane that will fly safely. The real question is whether a company that spent a quarter-century prioritizing Wall Street can truly reverse engineer its own corporate soul.
This raises an important question about the future of aviation itself. It'll be fascinating to watch.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. We will see you next time.